So, what are your salary expectations? There it is. The question that quietly changes the interview. Everything feels good until this moment. The conversation is flowing. You feel confident. You feel aligned. And then the energy shifts. Not because the question is unfair, but because most candidates answer it in a way that instantly changes how they are seen. This question doesn't end interviews loudly. It doesn't come with rejection emails or awkward silence. It ends them quietly. You give your answer. The interviewer nods. They move on, and later, you simply never hear back. Not because you weren't qualified, but because your answer repositioned you as a cost instead of a candidate. Let's talk about how that happens. The most common mistake is answering too quickly. The interviewer asks about salary, and the candidate gives a number. Based on my experience, I'm looking for around 90,000. It sounds confident. It sounds prepared. And in many cases, it's the moment the interview is effectively over. Because once you give a number too early, the conversation changes. You are no longer being evaluated on your skills, judgment, or long-term value. You are being evaluated against a budget. And here's the problem. You don't know what that budget is. If your number is higher than what they planned, you quietly price yourself out. If it's lower, you weaken your position before negotiations even begin. Either way, you lose leverage without realizing it. Some candidates sense this risk and try to avoid it by being vague. They say things like, "I'm flexible. I'm open to discussion. I'm sure we can agree on something fair." This feels safe, but it creates a different problem. From the interviewer's perspective, this doesn't sound strategic. It sounds unprepared. It suggests you haven't researched the market or that you don't know how to handle a serious business conversation. For mid-level and senior roles, that matters. Because this question isn't really about money, it's about judgment. Interviewers are using this moment to assess three things. First, whether your expectations are realistic for the role. Second, whether you understand your market value. And third, whether you can handle sensitive conversations calmly and professionally. They're also watching how you answer. Do you rush? Do you get uncomfortable? Do you try to escape the question? Strong candidates don't do any of those things. They slow the conversation down. Instead of treating salary as a demand, they treat it as a discussion that requires context. Here's the framework strong candidates use. First, they acknowledge the question without resistance. Something simple and professional like, "That's an important question, and I'm happy to discuss compensation." This shows maturity, not defensiveness, not anxiety. Then comes the key move. Before giving any numbers, they redirect the conversation. They say something like, "At this stage, I'm more focused on fully understanding the responsibilities of the role and how success is measured." Or, "I'd like to make sure I have a clear picture of the expectations before discussing specific figures." This isn't avoidance. It's positioning. It tells the interviewer, "I take this seriously and I don't rush decisions that matter." Sometimes the interviewer accepts this and moves on. Other times, they push back. They might say, "We do need to make sure we're aligned on compensation." That's your cue to introduce a range, not a number. But only after you've done your homework. Strong candidates don't guess. They research. They understand what similar roles pay in their industry, location, and level of responsibility. And when they present a range, they do it calmly, not as a demand, not as an ultimatum. For example, based on my research and the scope of the role, similar positions in this market tend to fall within a certain range, depending on responsibilities and the overall compensation structure. Notice what this does. It shifts the focus away from personal desire and toward market reality. It also creates space for a real conversation. Now, let's compare two answers. A weak answer sounds like this. "I'm looking for about 90,000, but I'm flexible." That one sentence does two things wrong. It locks you into a number too early, and it immediately weakens your position by trying to sound agreeable. A strong answer sounds different. "That's a fair question. At this point, I'm more focused on understanding the role and how I can contribute effectively." Based on my research, similar positions tend to fall within a certain range, but I'd be happy to discuss specifics once we confirm there's a strong mutual fit. Same situation, completely different positioning. The interviewer hears confidence, judgment, and professionalism, not pressure, not desperation. There's one more mistake candidates make here. They treat this moment emotionally. They worry about losing the opportunity. They worry about sounding greedy. So they answer quickly, hoping to keep the interview alive. But here's the reality. If an interview quietly ends because you handled the salary conversation professionally, it was never going to lead to a good outcome. Strong companies expect candidates to understand their value and communicate it without panic. That expectation applies even in junior roles. Because salary conversations aren't about entitlement, they're about alignment. The next time you hear, "What are your salary expectations?" don't rush to fill the silence. Don't reduce yourself to a number. Slow the conversation down, add context, and let the discussion happen at the right time. That's how strong candidates stay in control without ever sounding difficult.